Good afternoon, everybody. I'd like to thank everyone for coming, and I'd like to welcome Senator Menendez. And Mr. Menendez, would you please join me on stage?
Always do. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Thank you for being warm hosts. Senator, welcome. Thank you for coming to Texas and for Houston. We were talking earlier, we were talking about Sandy and Hurricane Harvey that we're dealing with. There's a lot we can learn from New Jersey and how we do our claims and how we take care of the people that are most hit by the hurricane. We're fortunate. We just saw a report in Puerto Rico that so many people were killed that nobody really knows about. So we count our blessings. But thank you for being here. I just wanted to welcome everyone and invite our friend Luis and thank him for not just always hosting and opening up, him and Kamala opening up their home, but really organizing. It takes a lot to get all of us to show up at a certain time, at a certain place, and to contribute. And Nomi takes the time to deal with each of us and our dysfunctions. So he knows how to get to each of us, talk to us, tell us what we're doing and why we're here. Nomi has helped Senator probably most fundraisers for Democratic senators in Texas. So it's a frequent place where he convenes all of us. What I appreciate the most about him is that he doesn't just hold the event, but you'll probably hear from him because somebody here will have some issue or something and he'll be the first one to call you. And if you respond to him, you will find that you will be here many times in this house. Because he will remind us that Senator Menendez stands for us, so we have to stand for him. And so as you meet some of the people around the room, you will know that our common denominator is Nomi. He's our contact point to you. So with that, Nomi.
Thanks, Mr. Well, welcome everybody. Welcome Senator Menendez. Some of you were here 4 years ago when we previously hosted Senator Menendez. It's always good to see you. I just want to recognize some of the elected officials that are here. We have our Judge, Smoots Thomas here. We have President of Islamic Society of Greater Houston, Mr. M.J. Khan is here. We have the Executive Director of the ACLU, Terry is here. Good to see you, Terry. And then we have a few people that are running for judge. We have Deborah Davis here, that's running for the 270 Judicial District Court. We have Christine Weems, that is running for the 281st Judicial District Court. We have Tree Kulkarni here, who's running out the Sugar Land for Congress. Great candidates. We also have a Houston Rockets player, Luke is here, supporting the event. I'd also like to recognize the host for today that made this event happen, Dr. Asif Kadir. Thank you for your help. Thank you for your help. Amir Shanat, thank you so much for your help. Mr. Tahir Javed is also one of the hosts. He could not be here with us, but I think his son is here. How are you? Thank you so much for This was a last-minute event that Senator Booker called me and asked if we could squeeze in an event for Senator Menendez. He had a lunch here today, and he's got a dinner right after this. So I said, of course, we can refuse Senator Booker, and it's always good to support Senator Menendez. Senator Menendez is a ranking member on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, someone who came out very strongly against Mike Pompeo when he was being confirmed. Unfortunately, he did get confirmed, but Senator Menendez did what he could do to stop it. Also, we know recently that President Trump has nominated an anti-immigrant hardline stance person for the office of refugee. And I know, Senator Menendez, I'd like for you to talk just a little bit about that, about the stance you're taking against that nominee. So I know you guys are not here to hear from me, so without further ado, would you please join me in welcoming Senator Menendez.
Well, thank you, Nomi, very much for opening up your home again, and I appreciate it, and we appreciate your commitment to our party and to our principles and ideals.
Thank you.
I want to thank all of our co-hosts who joined in the effort, and all of you for joining. I've never been among so many judges unless I was in court, so that's been a while. So in any event, and thank you all for joining us. So This time in our run for the race for re-election to the Senate, we are facing a multi-millionaire farmer executive who is liquid to the tune of $120 million and has said that he will spend anywhere between 25 and 40 million of his money, and he has already spent $4 million on the air. We're not even at our primary yet, so he is on his way to doing what he said he was going to do. As someone who has dedicated his entire adult life to public service, I don't have $40 million to run a campaign, so we travel the country and gain support from people who believe in what I stand for, my advocacy, my votes, my views. So I appreciate your collective help, because the work that I get to do is only done as someone who grew up poor in a tenement in New Jersey, the son of Cuban refugees, the first in my family to go to college. The only way that I get to be one of 100 United States senators in a country of 320 million people is by the support of individuals from across the country who believe in our work and our advocacy. So I really appreciate your help here today in that regard, in a very challenging race. In 2006, when I got elected, it cost me $20 million. In 2012, when I got reelected, it cost me another $20 million, and that's because New Jersey is in the midst of the most expensive media markets in the country. New York City and northern and central New Jersey, Philadelphia in the south, the first and fourth most expensive media markets, and no New Jersey media presence of its own to be able to default to. So it's a very expensive race. And so against a very wealthy incumbent. So that's the challenge, is that he's got a lot of money. The good part is that you'd want to run against him. You know, he is someone who, in New Jersey, President Trump's numbers are dismal, 67% negative, 57% extremely negative of the 67%. The former governor of New Jersey, Chris Christie, his numbers are worse than Trump's, if you can believe that. My opponent was engaged with both of them before, he's decided to run. He was a Trump delegate, a super PAC funder, and a whole host of things that I think don't inure to his benefit. And then lastly, he is a pharmaceutical executive who just left the company, but made money at the company by gouging cancer patients, by continuously raising the cost of the one cancer drug that's about 70% of the company's profits. So last year alone, he raised this drug 3 times, raking in $80 million more in profit than he already had, and then parachuted out with $34 million of it. And so it's a very compelling story. This is a drug that costs $250 to make, $20,000 a vial now to be able to purchase. And for a universe of cancer patients, it's what keeps them alive. And so it's really unconscionable to be doing that as the way in which you drive record profits for your company. And there's a whole host of other things, but we'll save that for New Jersey voters to talk about. I'm driven to continue to do this work because I am more concerned about our country than at any time in my 26 years in the Congress, between the House and the Senate, or my 44 years in public service when I began as a school board member. I was 19. I was told that because of my grades and my activities, I could be in the senior honors program, but I had to come up with $200 for the books. My parents were poor. I lived in a tenement, and I didn't have $200 for the books, and I couldn't understand for the life of me if I had the ability and the grades and not the money I'd be barred from being in the honors program. So I created such a ruckus that they gave me the books, told me to shut up, and put me in the honors program. But I didn't feel right about it because I had friends who had the ability and the grades, and like me, they didn't have the money, but unlike me, they didn't say anything, and they didn't get in. So I started a petition drive to change the school board from a very corrupt one that was appointed by a corrupt mayor to an elected one by the public. At the age of 19, I spent a whole summer getting thousands of signatures on a referendum to change the school board to an elected one. I put the referendum on the ballot. I passed the referendum at 19. I ran for the first school board elections in my hometown at the age of 20, and I won. And that was 44 years ago. So I served as a school board member, the mayor of my community, the first Hispanic to win state in the state as mayor, the first Hispanic to win statewide in the state Senate, the first Hispanic to get elected to Congress, and the first minority person to be elected to a position statewide in New Jersey history. So it's been an extraordinary ride. And I share that only to say that when I say I have never seen a more challenging time for our country, we have seen challenges at any given time here and there, but I have never seen the challenges that we have under this administration, where I am deeply concerned that we are on the verge of a constitutional crisis because the president believes that he is above the rule of law. He believes that he is above the law. And in doing that, he is trying to undermine the very Department of Justice that all of us have to live under. And so I get deeply concerned about where he is heading. I get deeply concerned as the person who is supposed to be the leader of the free world, as someone who has done foreign policy for 26 years, as to the challenges we have globally. I have never seen a more challenging set of global issues and the confluence of such than in the 26 years that I've been in Congress doing foreign policy. So I'm deeply concerned that we have someone who should be the leader of the free world, but has no strategy on behalf of our nation as to how do we engage with the challenges of Iran, or how do we engage in Southeast Asia, or how do we deal with the rising China who threatens us in the South China Sea and is an enormous competitor to us economically, both here in our own hemisphere and across the world. How do we deal with a Russia that is above its views, that it's above the international order and can violate it with impunity? How do we deal with a Venezuela in our own hemisphere that is creating an enormous catastrophe with thousands and thousands of people living in the country, a country that should be very wealthy if it was well run? And the list goes on and on. North Korea, of course, is the most poignant of those at the moment. So when I think about a president who is trigger happy versus trying to use robust diplomacy to achieve their goals and doesn't have a strategy for how we meet our challenges in the world, it makes me concerned. It makes me concerned that we don't have an economic policy that helps people rise into that middle class and strengthen that middle class. Because at the end of the day, the policies that are being driven by the administration are really driven for the top 1/10 of 1% of the nation. And it makes me concerned when the administration's policies continuously drive up the cost of health care purposely so that they can ultimately say that the Affordable Care Act should be done away with. In New Jersey, that created 800,000 people who now have health insurance who never had it before, and thousands more who no longer are subject to a pre-existing condition limitation, lifetime cap, and a whole host of other things. And this administration methodically works, and I think cynically, in undoing everything that President Obama was in the midst of, or the legacy elements that he was able to achieve, simply because it was President Obama. And so it is, in my mind, so alarming to see a president that instead of bringing us together in common cause to move the nation forward, seeks to divide us by who we are, what's our race, what's our ethnicity, where we came from, or who we love. And that is the most incredible thing for me to see the presidency of the United States be driven in that way. So this election, in my mind, is one of the most consequential elections we have ever had. As a check and balance to this administration, this is the only opportunity. Right now, they have the White House, they have the House of Representatives, they have the United States Senate. Appointments to the Supreme Court, I pray for Ruth Bader Ginsburg every day that she chooses not to retire, because that will change the court dramatically. A court that is deciding, for example, on issues of the Muslim ban. A court that is deciding on voting rights. A court that is deciding on redistricting. A court that can either continue to keep promise open or turn back the clock to a time and place none of us want to go to. Those things are going to be decided in this election. Do we have a majority in the Senate that can stop that from happening? Do we have a majority in the House of Representatives that can be a check and balance to the executive branch of the administration? I've never seen a more consequential election because of the nature of what this administration is all about. So that's why I thank you for your help from me. That's why I thank you for those of you who are involved here in Texas on behalf of congressional candidates and Beto O'Rourke and others, you know, so that we can ultimately have that check and balance to really find the country that we had before. For me, this election is about reclaiming our nation as a first step, and then moving on to 2020 to finally make sure that we have a president that brings us all together in common cause, whether that divides us. And so this is the first step, and that's why I appreciate your help here, so that we can continue to do that step forward. And with that, I'm happy to answer some questions.
We just got a few questions, and then we've got tea and appetizers and some sandwiches. But we had a late arrival. We have the fabulous Miss Joanne Herring here. Joanne, thank you so much for joining us. Joanne is doing great work in Afghanistan with her charity. She was also portrayed by Julia Roberts in the movie Charlie Wilson's War. And I invited her especially to come and brief you on some of the things that she's doing in Afghanistan. So thank you for being here, Joanne. So any questions for Senator Menendez? Edgar, I know you have a question.
Yeah, one of the issues that's very
Edgar, come on up a little bit.
one of the issues that's very important to a lot of people in Texas is the current efforts by this administration to separate families, specifically taking children away from asylum seekers and refugees. I just want to hear more about what you and other fellow members of Congress are planning to do to stop that kind of traumatic terrorizing of immigrant families.
Yeah, it's not who we are as a nation to give the back of the hand instead of the warm embrace of Lady Liberty to people who are fleeing horrible circumstances. These are children that are no risk to the United States of America. And our refugee policy has been a beacon of light in the world to not only allow individuals who truly are fleeing horrible circumstances, as many of the Central American children are, where their choice and the choice of mothers who make this choice with them is to either stay and die or flee and live. That's the choice. And our refugee policy also sends a message to the world that other countries should engage in receiving people. We have the biggest number of refugees since World War II in the world, 60 million and counting. We accept a fraction, a small fraction of those individuals. The administration, Nomi mentioned earlier, that the administration has nominated someone whose policy and whose history would be anathema to everything we have ever done as it relates to refugee issues. And so on this issue of tearing children apart from their mothers, so a mother comes to the border or through the border with a child and they intercede that mother, they will take the child away from the mother regardless of age, which is unconscionable. And so much for the party of family values and family unification. We are pressing hard against the administration, but we don't have the votes. I've spent the better part of my 26 years in Congress on immigration reform. I was with Ted Kennedy when I first came to the Senate. He was alive, and we failed at that time. Then I was with the Gang of 8, 4 Democrats, 4 Republicans, where John McCain was on the Republican side, and I and others were on the Democratic side. We actually came with a comprehensive immigration reform that passed the Senate with 67 votes. We don't get that type of vote on contentious issues, but language in the House of Representatives, because it never saw under John Boehner the opportunity for a vote. Had it had a vote, it would have passed, I believe. Then more recently, I was working with the Gang of 6. I don't know why they call them gangs. I don't like to belong to a member of a gang, but anyhow, this Gang of 6, 3 Democrats, 3 Republicans, I was one of them, where we were trying to help dreamers and their immediate families. And the president, I was at the White House at that famous, meeting where he let the cameras roll for on and on and on. And, he said he wanted to do a big deal. And then the deal got harder as we tried to make it happen. And I even agreed to things that I never thought were possible for me to agree to, because I abhor the wall. I think it is the most repugnant thing that you can do. And I've never seen a war that hasn't been overcome, under, over, around, or through at the end of the day. But it's the most repugnant message we send to our neighbor to the south, which is the second largest market of exports of the United States for goods and services in the world. in the world, happens to be Mexico. And so I think it's horrible to, when the president talks about chain migration, when you want to dehumanize someone, you make it an inanimate object, right? So a chain migration. Chain migration is family reunification, is the bedrock of what American immigration policy has been for over a century. And as a matter of fact, it's ironic because Donald Trump is the beneficiary of chain migration. His grandfather, Friedrich Trump, who lived in Germany, was claimed by his sister, who was a United States citizen. So the sister brought Friedrich Trump to the United States under the fifth preference category. Friedrich Trump gave birth to Donald Trump's father, and Donald Trump's father ultimately and his wife gave birth to Donald Trump. He would not be the president of the United States if it wasn't for quote-unquote chain migration. So the wall, family reunification, changing the nature of immigration in the future, all of these things. Well, we did elements of that, just enough to suffice to be able to get him to give the dreamers, and the way we devised it, 3 million people actually would have. We never said that because we felt that we said the number, we wouldn't get what we wanted. And even then, he rejected it all. So it's a really tough challenge for us. The courts are, to some degree, our backbone, but that again is a reason for this election. I know that my Democratic colleagues, if we have a majority, would then be able to challenge the president because we would send him legislation, particularly in a must-pass piece of legislation like funding the government, where we could include protections for families at the border, protection for dreamers, and he would have to choose to close the government down over that issue. I don't think when push comes to shove, he'd do that. But if we don't have majorities in the Congress to challenge him that way, not a lot we can do with an administration that's vicious at the end of the day. We keep raising it, we keep driving it. Cory Booker, my colleague, drove it at the Judiciary Committee, which he now sits on. But, you know, the elections have consequences. And we are living through the consequences. I know sometimes we think it doesn't matter if it's this one or the other one. Elections have consequences. We are living through the consequences of the choice that the American people made in the last election. And so now we have to undo it, and that's, I hope this election can be in the beginning of safety for families who truly are fleeing to make a political asylum case.
Any other questions? Really? This many lawyers? All right, go ahead.
Senator, thank you so much. We are among friends, so we can talk openly. Right? They used to say that Republicans don't have a heart, and Democrats don't have a spine. I understand that elections have consequences, but there's a lot more Democrats can do, because you all have pulpits, you all have television, you all have radio, you all have town hall meetings. I don't see Democrats being so energized like Republicans. Even when they are in the minority, they can get up and they can articulate their position and they can make big deal out of their point of view. Even sometimes it's just talking points. Sometimes they're spinning. But somehow I feel Democrats, as soon as, like, give you an example. There was a discussion in the Congress about the dreamers. At the last moment, Democrats give it up. That okay, we will wait for another time when there is a budget deadline or ceiling of the debt ceiling deadline. So my point is, my question is that why can't you all use what you have available instead of waiting for when you have supermajority in the House and the Senate and the White House? There are a lot of things can be done, but because issues are like this issue of babies taken away from the family. What Muslims are going through every day. President is talking about all kinds, the international crisis. What's happening in Palestine? What's happening in Syria? What's happening with Iran deal? I mean, somewhere, Democrats need to stand up and raise their voice.
Well, I need to invite you to Washington because you see us standing up, believe me. And listen, I can say we can always do more. But, for example, on the Muslim ban, it is Democrats that have led the way in fighting the administration I have personally signed on to a series of amicus briefs to the Supreme Court and other courts to push back on the administration. It is those of us who have offered amendments on the floor to push back on the administration. On the question of these young people and the dreamers, we as Democrats have never chosen to close down the government, because nobody wins when you close down the government. At the end of the day, when somebody's waiting for their Social Security check, or a veteran is waiting for their check or their visit to the VA hospital, you close down the government, believe me, you lose. And the only people who have really done it in the past have been Republicans, and each time it has cost them enormously as a consequence. But we said, unless we get something for the dreamers, we were ready to do it. And we did it for a couple days. And we had an unyielding president. Now, how long could we have gone? A month? I don't think the nation would have tolerated us. I think we would probably not win these midterm elections and really be in a position to do something. But we've never ever taken the position that we won't vote to continue the government, except for dreamers. And we hope that that threat would have actually carried out, because it was closed for a couple of days. We hope that that threat would actually have changed the administration's heart, but it didn't. On a whole host of things, the only entity that's fighting back, who is fighting back and making it this crucible of the public attention on the president's perversion of the rule of law and the Justice Department? It's us. See Dick Blumenthal on the TV every night, Sheldon Whitehouse on the TV, Cory Booker on the TV. They're the ones who are driving, we're the ones driving this issue to keep it in the public attention and the crucible. When I drive the Senate Foreign Relations Committee and have nominees of the administration, it's not easy to take the nominee of Secretary of State, who I thought would get through eventually, and then, but I used his hearing to drive the inadequacies of the administration and the danger that the administration proposes in a global context. So I guess we could always do more, but believe me, there's a lot going on. But at the end of the day, I cannot pass a law unless I can get 60 votes. I cannot stop a Supreme Court nominee unless I can get 51 votes. I cannot make something happen unless I have enough votes in the Senate and in the House of Representatives and then somebody in the White House to sign it. So we can do a lot of yelling and screaming, but from my mind, to really achieve progress and success, we need to have the votes necessary to make it happen. And that's why I prioritize that in terms of being able to make a real difference. But I don't, I take your criticism totally legitimately insofar as there's always more that we can do. But sometimes I just think people don't know what we're doing. And breaking through, the biggest megaphone in the country, for better or for worse, is that whoever sits in the White House. Everything else is a lot harder, unless you really want to be extreme in some of your views, like when Ted Cruz closed down the Congress reading, green eggs and ham. I don't think that ended up producing anything, other than that he went on a long filibuster that didn't accomplish any goal that he was trying to accomplish. But it did hurt the country being closed for a couple of days. So I think we always have to evaluate how we really choose our battle and how we try to win it.
So here, Senator, we're really preaching to the choir because everybody here is very engaged with the Democratic Party here locally, statewide, and nationally. And just coming back to the point the Senator made, we really have to take back the House and the Senate, and that takes money. So I just want to give a friendly reminder to everybody that this is a fundraiser. Some of you have already given, some of you haven't. Any amount that you can give at this point would be greatly, greatly appreciated. Senator, you're always welcome in Houston. It's always good to see you.